Let's get it going. So I have Zak here. You've been a domain industry lawyer for about 25 years. I think it'll be 25 in a year, which is wild. You've
Wow.
been part of countless landmark cases that have shaped the foundations of the internet and our domain name law. You've provided your service on a very international basis. You're a general counsel and leader of the ICA, or one of the leaders of the ICA. And you are also a UDRP panelist for CIIDRC. What is that?
That's the Canadian Internet Dispute Resolution for outfit. So they're like WIPO or like the forum. They handle UDRP disputes as well. There's like 7 accredited versions.
Got it. And I kind of consider you a patriot for domain investors and anyone who registers a domain name, because you are on the forefront of trying to keep the costs of owning a domain name as low as reasonably possible. Like, is that fair to say?
Yeah.
I remember meeting you. I think I met you when you were with Ken Hansen, when Ken was wearing one of his hockey shirts at, I think I met you at the conference in Vancouver when we were harassing CIRA to allow them to allow .ca registrations to anyone and not just Canadian citizens. Do you remember that?
Wow. You know what? I don't remember that, but that sounds like a likely scenario, Jeff.
Did you wear your hockey jersey to the conferences too? I remember Ken Hansen did and a few of the other guys did, but I don't remember if you ever did.
No, I could never get my last name, Muscovitch, on the back of the jersey. It was too long, so...
So before we get into, did you do any law before you before you got in the domain business, or has it always been legal?
Yeah.
Legal stuff?
So I was in law school like 95 to 98 kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working as a waiter throughout law school. And I ran into this pastry chef who worked at the restaurant who, I said, he was German pastry chef. And he says to me, Zach, what do you think about the internet? And I guess this was maybe even earlier than that, maybe 94 or something, when I was doing undergrad in college. And I hadn't really heard of the internet. And so once I looked into it, it started fascinating me. And then in law school, I started trying to research and write about internet law stuff, but it wasn't even a field, right? So a lot of people didn't know what the internet was back then. There was certainly no internet law per se. And so I started writing some papers. Like, one was about taxation of internet commerce. And it was one of the first papers on that subject ever. And another one was something called the 5 billion channel universe, which kind of envisioned, YouTube success, really, right? Where everyone can be a producer and a broadcaster. And so I was really into internet law. But when it came time to getting a job, there was no jobs in internet law because there weren't even departments for internet law in law firms. So I did the next best thing, which was get into personal injury. And so I started doing, dog bites, broken legs, head injuries, stuff like that. And I never got into law school hoping to get into personal injury. It was not my top priority. But I couldn't get a job doing internet law, so that's what I did. But when I was working at this personal injury law firm, I came across news article about a local guy. I'm from Toronto, who was a defendant in a lawsuit by some huge companies about a domain name that he had. And so I offered to my services, 3 weeks out of law school, pro bono. And it was a domain dispute that was in federal court. And that's really what got me interested in domain names. So I never sought out to do domain names. I sought out to do internet law. But this was what, I discovered. And so that's what got me my start in it. I eventually stopped doing internet law. I stopped doing personal injury law and opened up my firm a few years after that.
So you quit a pretty consistent living at a law firm with a steady flow of cases.
Yeah, it was a very good living. And, and yeah, checks arrived every 2 weeks, and I and so when I opened up my own law firm, I had like one case, and it was a domain dispute case. It was somebody that had lost a UDRP, an online arbitration himself, and then I contacted him and said, we could. He happened to be from Toronto, so I said, listen, like we could take them to court. It was Molson, the brewery.
Yeah.
The domain name was Canadian.biz. So I contacted him and said, let me help you with this. He said, well, he couldn't afford any fees. I'm used to that. So I did it. I told him, I said, listen, I'll do it for no fees that you have to pay. But if the judge orders the other side to pay you your legal fees, then that will all go to me. And so I really had to win this case because if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to pay the office rent, etc. I had to buy a computer, had to buy a photocopier. You needed those back then. And so at the end of the day, the judge awarded us, I think, $16,000, which was like a small fortune back then, and especially to me. And so with that money, I paid the rent, I got the photocopier, I got the computer, paid the insurance, and so I opened up my own practice on the back of that first domain name dispute case.
How many times were you sweating bullets when you thought the case wasn't going in your way?
Yeah, it was like I couldn't lose. Basically, there's no way I could lose this case. I would have been really screwed. But I had high confidence in it. Although it was the first case ever appealed from a UDRP to a Canadian court, as far as I can recall. So it was a brand new field, no precedent to go on, going up against huge companies, a client who couldn't pay the fees. So what could possibly go wrong?
You're like Aaron Brockovich of Canada.
yeah, but just domain names. But yeah.
Yeah, that's an impressive story. And then from there, you obviously got the word out that you are somebody that is specialized in this, and there's enough. I'm sure there's more problems in Canada and other places around the world that people found you.
Yeah.
Did the business start to take off from there, or was it still a little touch and go for a while?
Well, I'm still waiting for it to take off.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But yeah, so whenever I would get a case like this case with Molson I mentioned to you, I would really try to pump it. Like I would issue a press release. I'd speak to a friend who was a writer. I would email law journals and stuff to try to build up a reputation, even though I'd only been out of law school, months. And word of mouth came as a result of that. That led to another case and then another case. And so I was still doing personal injury at the time, just, on my own firm, because, I would need a broken leg case to pay for the time I spent on these domain name cases that would take longer and were much more speculative. So it was a very interesting practice. I have like a dog bite, depositions on Tuesday, and then on the Wednesday I'd be in court arguing about trademark rights.
That's great.
Yeah.
When's the last personal injury case you took on?
Oh boy, yeah, I don't think I've taken one. It's got to be 15 years or more. I haven't done personal injury. Maybe closer to 18 years.
Yeah. My family is a lot of lawyers. I'm not sure if I ever told you that.
Yeah.
My dad is, my uncle is, my
Wow.
dad's uncle was, my grandfather was.
Wow.
And my dad did some personal injury and some criminal stuff, but he ended up doing real estate. And he said the personal injury, especially when it came to, like you said, a dog bite on a child or child abuse or really bad abuse situations, he said it just ate him up. He didn't like it. He just couldn't do it.
I could totally understand that, Jeff. The horrific photos that you would see, and you have to look at these as the lawyer, right? I'd be like, looking away a little bit from the photo. I didn't like to see it. And so, yeah, some very tragic circumstances where you really have to summon all your courage to deal with the situation in case of, deceased.
Yeah, and some of these people are your clients who inflicted this pain on little children or something. And so my dad started doing real estate. But yeah, I mean, I remember us being in a family in that situation where my dad was getting into real estate, and maybe at the time he had his brother as a partner, and business wasn't going according to plan, and things got a little worrisome. And for me with this business, and the reason, like I was saying to you before we started recording, is I find it interesting that a lot of people just see the success and they don't see the struggle that people go through. And it's like, you could have taken the easy path and you could have stuck with doing personal injury, and I'm sure you'd still be making a great living. Your face could be on every street bench in Toronto right now, and we're on billboards like in Florida. You go down the highway and it's like law firm after law firm. But it seems like this was your calling, and it's gone well. So
did you ever think about becoming a lawyer yourself, Jeff, considering so many members of your family are in law?
There's a law school in Boston called Suffolk that a lot of my family members went to. And when I graduated college, I applied, I got in. I was supposed to attend in September, and leading up to when school was going to start, I decided what happened was I started selling loans. And my dad was like, look, if you sell mortgages, you can sell mortgages part-time and go to law school. And that will help, support yourself. And then when you get out, you'll understand the mortgage business, and then you can join me in the real estate business. And I was making a really good living in my early 20s selling loans. I had a knack for it, and I didn't have the drive or the passion to go. And I had a couple of friends that went to law school, and talking to my dad and my other family members about it, about how much you have to immerse yourself in the material, the amount of reading and the amount that you have to be part of it. I was just like, I'm not going to pass. Like, I'm not in it. Like, I don't have a desire for this. And I also didn't really want to, like, and my dad had a great practice. I would have made a lot of money there, would have made a great living, but I also didn't want to live in the same town I grew up in. And my dad, in the town I grew up in, had, two traffic lights when I grew up. And then going in my dad's little office that was in the center of town, with the white picket, with a fence, and the little law office, and the little old house that was converted into a law office, which was great, wasn't what I wanted to do or be. I just don't think I would have been very fulfilled with that, personally. So
when you're, sorry, go ahead.
So when I told my dad, it was, a long pause, and I think there was a lot of disappointment. And, he told me he was disappointed. And I said, well, maybe, we'll reapproach this in a couple of years, but I think he knew that I wouldn't. And, after I got going in sales, I sold loans, and then I left that, and I was selling these HR solutions, and that I got laid off from that because 2009 hit. Then I started working at Cito, and then Cito I did pretty well at, and then excelled in the domain business. My dad has said to me, he's like, I think you made the right choice,
Mm-hmm.
And so it's worked out,
right.
And that's it.
So, you were selling mortgages and other stuff, and now you're selling domain names. Do you think that a salesman can sell anything if you have a natural talent to sell as you do? Could it be anything from condos to frozen fish to computer equipment? It's just a matter of getting acclimatized to the particular field.
I think me personally, I think it's, yeah. I think the thing is that for me personally, as a salesperson, I think the reason why I've excelled at mortgages, and I excelled in the selling this HR staffing technology, and then with domain names, is I'm a very curious person. So selling mortgages gave me a much better understanding of how much people actually make, how much money they actually have saved, how much money.
So you were selling mortgages before you even had a mortgage yourself, right?
I didn't even know what a mortgage was when I started selling mortgages, to be totally honest.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't really sure. My dad was just like, look, you should go sell these things. And I was like, okay. So did like training and whatever. And then I learned a lot about credit, what was important with credit depth and the personal side, and then with personal loans, and then with, money and savings, and seeing certain people met certain profiles, like a guy who's 35 has $1 million in the bank. And I'm like, whoa, how'd you do that?
Yeah.
So that would get a conversation going. Or some guy who I'm looking at is making good money, has nothing in the bank, and then hearing his story about how he's going to buy a boat this weekend, and that was interesting, because you'd start to make relationships just by having conversations, right? And then moving on to HR, I think I just really, and same with mortgages, I spent a lot of time studying the product. So even if I was selling horse manure, you still need to understand, if even though it's bags of shit, you still need to understand distribution, seasons, things like that. And you need to be able to talk to these farmers and understand what they're doing with it, when they need it, why they need it, what's better, what's worse. And so when it comes to domains, again, I find people and their stories really interesting. Not like Mark Zuckerberg didn't just become, he founded Facebook, but I'm sure there's hundreds of failures that they've had and products that have bombed. The metaverse isn't doing what they planned.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's one. Look at all of them when he was in college, and he has the two twins saying he stole their product, and whatever it is, and they all have a story. And when I sell domains, for me personally, it's not necessarily like, cue the band, I sold AI because for a shitload of money. I'm more excited to talk to somebody who might have started a business, hear how they got where they got, hear why they need the name, what they're going to do with it. They get the name. Like this one customer of ours, Felix, this company, it's kind of like a QuickBooks, but on steroids in fintech. And they came out with a company called Finally. We acquired finally.com for them, and they were then advertising it in Times Square. And I have a picture of it in Times Square. It says Finally, right after we got the domain name, it was there. And I thought, that was an exciting sale to be part of. I didn't retire on the earnings. I didn't knock it out. I didn't make a ton of money, but that to me is what's exciting about the job. And then, I've seen a little electric company, you sell them a domain name, and then you see it on a truck, somewhere. Yeah. And to me, that is the fun stuff, and I've read some of the things you've done. You've helped a lot of the little guys, and it doesn't have to be, David versus Goliath with Molson. You've helped me out on a few legal matters as well. So
it's I think what interests you with the sales is a lot of what interests me as the lawyers. That you switch from deal to deal, from domain name to domain name, and I switch from case to case or a transaction to transaction. And in the process, you learn a lot about specific fields of business. For example, if I have a dispute about a jewelry related domain name, I'm learning about the jewelry business. And then if it's a veterinarian dispute between two veterinarians about a domain name, I'm learning about the veterinary business or dentist or whatever it is. So you get to a window into a lot of different businesses, which is cool. And like you, I'll go to a mall and I'll say, I had a dispute with that, or I was involved in the transaction over that brand name. And that is the fun stuff. But on the other hand, there's the other similarity between domain sales and law is in the sense that both of us, when you're acting as a salesperson, I'm acting as a lawyer to domain business people, we're helping them make money. We make money in the course of it, whether it's commission or hourly rates, etc. But at the end of the day, our job is to help other people make money. And that can be very frustrating as a lawyer, because it makes you want to get into business. But you've actually made that leap. You actually moved from strictly sales to having a business. And so I really admire that.
Yeah. And my timing was not the best when I did it, I launched the business in January, and then things were looking good. And then when March hit, the pandemic hit, and I went from building a pipeline and a business. And prior to that, in launching the business, I actually took on some consulting gigs. I helped .inc with helping them build their sales team and doing some other things with them internally with sales. I helped some other smaller projects, and then I was working with MMX as well to help them with theirs, because that wasn't necessarily the goal when I set out, but you had to do, it's kind of like taking on some side injury cases. And then when you're building the business and things look like they're going well, and you're building technology, and you're going from Uniregistry, where we had marketing, we had developers, we had a lawyer, we had, everything, to look behind me and I'm all of it. And then you go and March hits, and all the buyers are like, when a seller countered, thank God we didn't want to spend the money. We're going another direction. We're not interested. And then all of a sudden the business, fell on its face, and people are freaking out. People are afraid. Different rioting was starting to happen in the streets. I just bought a new house in Massachusetts. So,
Right.
the expenses were relatively high, and the bank account wasn't going in the right direction, and things were getting scary there, and I was questioning if I did make the right decision quitting a well-paying job like you did in the Cayman Islands, and to kind of put it on the line,
Yeah.
and myself, I was questioning myself and my ability, and it's going to be 4 years in mid-December.
Wow. Congratulations.
And yeah, we're plugging along, and I think, like you say before, it was do or die. And, I had some salespeople that left Uniregistry or other places to come and work for us. And, the message I said is that people are going to have to start buying again. And if they're going to buy, we're going to be the ones who are first in line. So keep calling them, keep emailing them, don't give up. And it'll happen. And you know what? I mean, sometimes when I was saying it, I was thinking in the back of my head, I don't even know if I believe this bullshit, but let's see. You stick with it. And by mid-June, it was like somebody hit a switch, and then all of a sudden it came back. Right. And, but we've had, I don't know, last fall and last summer into last fall, and part of last fall, I was getting pretty concerned. Our sales volume, like a number of sales, was okay, but the size of the sales was down immensely. And so I thought going in, and even our fourth quarter was pretty slow. I thought this year was not going to be as good as it was the previous years. And this year it's really picked up. I don't know if more people have disputes when money is good, or do they have more disputes when the money gets tight? What do you think? What do you think happens in the business?
Yeah, I mean, the conventional wisdom is that when times are tough economically, generally speaking, there's more bankruptcies and more collections and disputes about money. But that isn't the mainstay of domain name law practice, which is just trademark related disputes. And so trademark related disputes happen in good times as much as bad times, I would think. And then in the transaction side, yeah, the ebbs and flows of the business affect the deal flow, certainly. So when there's slow domain name sales, there's less transactions to work on. But the great thing about domain name sales is that you only need one big one to set things right. Right? You just need the whale, right? You just need the whale. Yeah.
But the problem is that can happen in sales, is you have salespeople that only chase the white whales. Mm-hmm. And when the white whale blows up for whatever reason, then that person doesn't eat. Right. So the best thing you can be as a salesperson is consistent, and like when I sold sex.com for 13 million, I remember I sold a name for a couple of grand that same month, because you just don't know. You got to eat somewhere. So you got to keep going with the big ones and the little ones. And it's kind of like a game of war. Right. And sometimes you go through the pack and it's all 2s and 3s. And then sometimes you throw a couple aces, Yeah. So, but in any event, yeah, it's been quite an experience. We're getting old, Zach.
Yeah.
25 years, I've been in the business for almost 14. Or 14 now, we're thinking about it. Yeah. Looking back at it, it's unbelievable how much things have changed. right? From the industry and just the way things are. What do you think about it when you look back at it?
Yeah, like I look back at the early days of the internet really fondly because it was like such a heady time. Everything was brand new. You know, it would be fascinating to see what could be done online over the internet, and it was fascinating to see how domain names could be bought so cheaply and then sold for so much money in a relatively short period of time, and there wasn't a formal domain name industry per se. There were some efforts with some shows, conferences to put it together, but there weren't any publicly traded domain name companies, etc. And so those were very exciting, kind of pioneering times. Now it's we don't have that kind of headiness to the market, but we have something else, which is the stability of the secondary market having such a firm and successful place in the domain name ecosystem, and we have, for domain name investors, we've seen them evolve from being considered cyber squatters by most people to them being considered, credible domain name investors akin to real estate or other digital assets. So that maturation of the market is being a nice thing to see.
Mm-hmm. I think from my perspective, even when I got in the business, I feel like a lot of people understand that domains are valuable now, where before it was, like a 50-50 when you talk to people. I still think we get a lot of calls on names that are for sale that are multi-million dollars, and people say, I'll give you $100 for it. And then they're just blown away when we tell them the price, or they laugh at us. And it's like, well, do your research. You're going to see. But at the same time, when I look at the price of real estate in some areas, I'm blown away as well.
Yeah,
I'm not prepared for that either,
Yeah.
So, I think it's just understanding your market. And I also think, looking back at it, it seemed to me, so when you were talking about 94, 95, when you were in law school, I was 15, right? And so when I was 15 years old, we'd have the dial-up 2400 or 588 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
We would be in chat rooms on AOL, and we would be doing that. And it just seemed like the internet was just like the Wild West, and there was a ton of opportunity to make a lot of money back then. I think there's still, you're not going to get the whole deal where you can go and buy beer.com off some college kids for $5,000 and flip it for $2 million. I think those days are over. But I really believe that there are so many tools out there and so many opportunities for people to buy a cheap domain. And if they really think about it and stay dedicated to it and go through hard times, you can build a good little business. I don't think you're going to necessarily be able to IPO it and turn it into Facebook, in 5 years, but you certainly could make a very healthy living in an unlimited number of industries and not have to invest immense amounts of money hiring all kinds of developers and people, which you would have had to hire back in the 90s to build anything, right? And there's all kinds of widgets and things. And if you really spend the time at a minimum amount, I think, there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a trap to kind of start thinking that all the innovation has already been done, that there's no new ideas under the sun, that the way domain names are sold, that's fixed in place and there's no innovation that could be possible. Or the way registrars work, that is fixed in place. There's no improvements. There's no market share to be had, etc. All of those kinds of those are all traps. And I only realize that's wrong-headed thinking when I see a new company with an innovative solution or a better mousetrap come up in the domain name industry. I'm like, geez, you know what? There is more better and new that can still be done, and there's a lot of potential left in the market. It just takes the creativity and taking on the risk.
Yeah. I remember reading that the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office said around, it was like 1865, said that they were considering closing because all the good ideas were already thought up.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah. In fact, there's the original pioneers of domain name investing that hand registered domains or use software back in the day to get names that were unregistered or bought them cheaply early on. And those guys are great and been very successful. But there's this new generation of domain investors that weren't around. They were like probably not even 15 then. They might have been 5 then, or not even born then, and are doing incredibly well. With names that they're buying on drops using very sophisticated methods of selection and all kind of data points that they're looking and are acquiring huge portfolios and making a ton of money. And those are the volume guys. And then there's other guys that are using their creativity just to hand select names they believe will have potential and are doing tremendously well as well. And so that to me is really comforting, because it would be sad to be in an industry where the only people that could be successful were the ones that were involved at the very beginning. And so this kind of regeneration and new generation of domain name investors is really great to see.
Yeah. I think the thing is, though, like with anything, you look at somebody who is ahead of you in life, like with my dad, for example. I remember I used to tell my friends, I wish, as long as if I could just be as successful as my dad, I think, life will be awesome, because you see the house he owns, he has a car, like he goes on vacations. He doesn't even realize my mother went and spent $300 on groceries today, because he's,
right. It's a rounding error. Yeah.
Yeah. And it just seems like, when you were starting at zero, you just have so much, and like, even when I started my business, I was thinking to myself, it's like, is anyone going to use me? Am I going to make any sales? Like, is this going to happen? Like, you think these things, right? And I'm sure you thought with your practice, even though you had that one for free, it's like, are you going to be that guy who's just always struggling on a dream of something that isn't really, going to happen or materialize, and it's it just kind of doesn't necessarily work out, but then you realize that you found your niche and what you're passionate about, and it works, and I just think it just seems like the mountain is sometimes really high to climb. And I think right now, you don't look at somebody who started in the domain business, you only look at them because they're up here right now. But what about back then, when they were putting in a significant amount of money of their savings and their time? That's the other big expense. Buying these names when there was no trail paved, just like you were saying, like you did, right? And it's just like a total fucking dead end.
Yeah, like people ask me, so, if you've been doing this so long, why didn't you buy any domain names like 95, 97? Well, there's 2 reasons. One is because they cost $70 and I didn't have $70. All right. That's a lot of money, right? And so I knew guys that were borrowing money to buy $70 domain names. That was the registration fee. And also back then you didn't even know if these things were going to be worth $75 in a year or 5 years, right? There was no one was able to say that domain names were going to take off like they have. It was very, very speculative.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I remember I was buying my first used car, while I was in law school, and I at the sales center, I spoke to the salesman. I said, buddy, you should get a website and sell cars via the internet. And he's like, you got to be fucking joking, because no one's going to buy a car over the internet. They have to see it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Now look at Carvana. Yeah, it's wild. I mean, and I've also read online that people say that a realtor, their position or their job is going to evaporate in the next 5 to 10 years. I still don't really believe that. I think there still needs to be somebody involved with the paperwork. There's all kinds of issues and problems that can help navigate the space for you. Maybe that realtor might be sitting in Iowa and you're calling them on the phone and having them figure it out, and they're working in different markets. But I just can't imagine, there's certain things like that aren't going to change, but who knows? But let's talk about renewals and being $75.
Yeah.
So being part of the ICA, I received a letter that you forwarded, that you received from a colleague of yours, that kind of broke down the renewal of the .NET domain extension with Verisign. And I just want to point out something, and then I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you a question. So I'm going to do a little
Yeah.
background, and then I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask a question. So the background is that each registrar pays ICANN. This is how ICANN makes their money. Each registrar pays ICANN $4,000 a year plus 18 cents per domain name that's registered. Each registry pays ICANN $25,000 a year plus 25 cents a name past 50,000 domain registrations. Is that correct? Is that
Yeah, I
clear?
mean, there's differences between the so-called new GTLDs and the legacy TLDs in terms of the pricing,
Yeah.
but basically that's correct. Is that there ICANN gets its money from two places: the registrars and the registries.
Okay. And there was a pricing model shift, and to save people time who are going to be listening to this around 2005 to 2007, there was a different way that ICANN used to collect their fees, but it was changed. And at that time, Verisign was paying about $250,000 a year. But now, under the new model, they're paying around $55 million a year, which is over a third of the ICANN budget.
That's what I
Right?
understand. Yeah, I mean, but the way you describe it, it sounds like Verisign is worse off now, paying $55 million instead of 250, but they're actually ahead.
Are they ahead because of the number of registrations have gone up so much that they're paying that much?
Yeah.
Is that
So
what it,
so like how do you arrive at the price of a domain name? I'm not talking about a secondary market domain name, which is another very interesting conversation, but a hand registered, unregistered domain name. What's the cost of that? How would you arrive at the cost of that? Okay, so you have to have a computer, you have to have software, and you have to have a database of domain names. And so when someone registers a domain name, that one has to be taken out of circulation. And that's basically what a domain name registry is in its simplest form. It's a database, right?
Mhm.
And so, how much does it cost to run the database? Well, you need to have really good quality hardware. You need to have engineers. You need to have redundant systems. You need to have security. All these things, they cost money. And the operator of .com and .net, Verisign, they have to invest considerable amounts of money in that kind of infrastructure to be able to operate the registry. But Verisign doesn't really own the registry. ICANN, if there's an owner of it, it's kind of like the public airwaves.
Mhm.
ICANN is the manager in the public interest of these public resources. The new GTLDs that you could actually go out and buy by applying to ICANN, like dot this, dot that, dot horse, whatever. There's an application fee. You own that domain name. But the legacy ones like .com and .net, these are ones that weren't bought and paid for by anybody. They're managed by ICANN in the public interest, and then they hire a service company to manage them. So think of it like ICANN is the apartment building owner, but needs a superintendent to kind of run things for them. So they hire
Management.
the superintendent, right? And
Yeah.
so ICANN, as the owner of the property, normally would say, okay, like who's willing to be my superintendent and at what cost? And so the way this is normally done in business is bids are made, right? So I'm willing to be your superintendent, 50,000 a year. I'm willing to do it at 45,000 a year. Well, I may cost more, but look at the services I provide. And then the owner of the apartment has to make a considered judgment about who to select. So that used to be the way it worked at ICANN. Like in 2005 with .NET, ICANN actually put out the .NET contract out for bid. And it resulted in like a drastic reduction in the price of .NET domain names at the wholesale level from, I think it was like 650 to 350 or something like that. But then ICANN started saying to itself, we can't be changing superintendents so often because the superintendents need to be encouraged to invest in the hardware and the infrastructure to make this a secure and reliable, robust database. And so we want to give them a perpetual right to be the operator, so that we know that they will continue to invest, etc., and that because they won't invest and then lose the contract. But that kind of had this unintended consequence of, well, if you don't ever put this thing out to bid, how are you supposed to get the best possible or lowest possible price for good superintendent services?
Well, we're seeing it in the United States with Amtrak, right?
Yeah.
Amtrak is an embarrassment, and it's subsidized by the U.S. government, right? So if it was run by a privately held business, it would be same with the U.S. Postal Service, right? Same thing.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, ICANN's probably doing the right thing by contracting out its superintendent or operator services, but what they did is that they negotiated not just a virtually perpetual contract, one that can never be terminated, except for like a gross default that hasn't been cured, but also allowed perpetual price hikes in the .NET agreement, so that they're allowed to raise prices continually, like 10% a year. And when there was 100,000 domain .nets, that's and if they're going for $6 each, that's only 600,000. But when there's 13 million .nets and the price is now $10 because it's been going up and up, that's $130 million per year. And on the other side of the coin, infrastructure costs, server costs have been going down. And now there's not just one or two companies that can handle databases of domain names. There's many companies. Google could do it. Facebook could probably do it. Any number of companies can do it because it's not rocket science.
You also have companies that are proven in the market, like GoDaddy, that purchased the company that used to manage .NET. Like, shouldn't they be allowed to be part of the conversation? Right. Or other CCTLDs that are countries that manage their own extensions? Wouldn't they be in the mix?
Right. And so when we look at what other administrators like ICANN have done in other countries, so like in India, France, Australia, they put it out for bid, and inevitably it turns out, and like ICANN itself did in 2005, inevitably the price comes down through bidding for the tendering process, right? And so that doesn't happen with .NET, and it's the problem is that for you or me, if we're to pay for a .NET, it costs $10. If it goes up to $10.10 or $10.50, it's not going to be a big deal to us, right? If you have 10,000 .NETs, it becomes a bigger deal. But the reason why people don't get so upset about it is because they're overpaying on an individual basis. A domain name where the actual cost of managing the database is probably as low as $1 from looking at how other countries, how certain countries have done it.
It's probably less than that.
Yeah. Okay. So when we pay $10, we're overpaying by $9. But I don't get upset about losing $9 because I go to Starbucks and pay $7 for a drink, right? And I don't think twice about it. But when you look at that $9 overcharge, in my view, times 13 million, and you see that they're making it year after year, and that it's a public company that's buying back shares from their shareholders, and their stock price is going up and up, and there's no end in sight. And once you buy a .NET and you make your home on and invest in your website, and you have your backlinks, and it's on your business cards, and your customers know that you're there and you've branded it, you can't just switch to a cheaper domain name easily. And so there's real concerns about how the pricing of domain names for the legacy ones, .com and .net in particular, and .org, has gotten out of control.
Yeah. And the other thing is money aside, when you're not going to lose the contract unless gross negligence, which would require a 5-year lawsuit while you try to have to prove it, which is an impossible $100 million feat for ICANN to do, which they'd probably just rather have Verisign fix it rather than do something about it. What about innovation? Right. Yeah. What about the extension and getting it? So what I don't understand, and I know there's not a lot of innovation in the registry business. It's a pretty basic thing. There isn't much you can really do. But my question is when ICANN had that situation with .org, right? And I was reading about it before our call, that the California Attorney General came out when they shut down the sale of the .org extension to the private equity group, and the Attorney General said that ICANN is a California-based nonprofit corporation,
Mhm.
and California law gives the Attorney General authority to ensure nonprofits uphold the terms of their articles of incorporation. In ICANN's case, that includes a promise to make decisions, in quotes, for the benefit of the internet community as a whole.
Mhm.
So how can ICANN, with a straight face, say that by doing this is for the benefit of the internet community as a whole, to give this contract to someone that, in all intensive purposes, could never lose it and can raise the price of this on the American public and others around the world in an unlimited fashion, without any reason other than their own. Even if costs go down, they're still going to go up. So how would this be? How can this pass the Attorney
Right.
General of California this time?
Yeah. This so who is ICANN, right? ICANN isn't a government organization, as you mentioned. It's a private, not-for-profit California corporation. And so it's not like the Department of Commerce or Treasury or United Nations that's responsible to its member states, or the Department of Commerce responsible to the electorate. It is a private company that uses something called the multi-stakeholder model, which is very, very unique. What it means is that stakeholders, whether you're registrars, registries, intellectual property interests, business interests, all these groups are ICANN members and have representation on the councils and the boards, et cetera, through complex means of trying to make it fair. And they're the ones that decide as almost a trade association. What you had mentioned in your earlier comments is that, ICANN's funding, largely the lion's share of it, comes from one particular company. No surprise, Verisign, because it runs the .net and .com registries on the basis we discussed. And
Yeah.
and it's a volunteer organization. It has staff, but the people who participate and make the decisions are volunteers. But you wouldn't be interested in volunteering your time when you have a living to make. But if you're a large company that's making billions of dollars from the domain name industry, you could afford to send 1 or 10 or 20 staff people to be volunteers and participate in this system. And they're the ones that make the decision. So the decision-making process is unusual. And many people argue that it's not so much an oversight body as more akin to a cartel or a trade association where they're looking after their own interests, despite paying lip service to the public interest. Now the other aspect of it is that when the California Attorney General intervened, that was an incredible moment, because it was somebody with real authority, statutory oversight authority in California, taking a look behind the curtains at ICANN, saying, what is going on here? You guys can't let this happen. You guys have to stand up for the public interest. And that's ultimately what it would take, but at the federal level, Department of Justice, Department of Commerce, to do it, to intervene, to set things right on .com or .net pricing.
But that's just probably not going to happen, right?
Probably not going to happen.
Not. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happens from here? It's just, this is the way it is, like in The Mandalorian, this is the way. And you just kind of have to accept it and move on with your life, right?
Yeah, I mean that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that these incremental costs, perpetual every year percentages, those aren't going to prohibit innovation or registration of domain names in in a meaningful way at the individual level or even at the domain name investor level, provided their portfolio isn't massive. So it's okay in that respect. But but it does raise a couple, blowback issues. One is that the eventually when a company is able to charge whatever it wants because it's got captive user base, which is what I would say exists now. Once you make your home on .com or .net, you can't switch easily. You're stuck there, and if they continue raising the prices on you, you're captive. That combined with the fact that ICANN hasn't innovated, and it released new GTLDs, new extensions in 2012. That's 11 years ago, and they're not going to be opening it up for more extensions until 2024 or 2025, 26. That lack of innovation and slow moving business approach has opened up this can of worms with Web3 domain names and blockchain domain names, and so it's creating some competition in the respect of alternatives to ICANN domain names. But at the end of the day, the ICANN domain names are much more secure and reliable and governable than pure blockchain domain names, because it's difficult to enforce IP rights on blockchain domain names. The web browsers haven't adopted to blockchain domain names, etc. And so it's left ICANN as a slow mover with increasing prices, and that's not a great place you want to be as a business or an entity.
But from ICANN's perspective, right?
Yeah.
So in the last 10 years, we've seen explosive growth in registrations in COM and many other extensions, right? And so at 25 cents or 18 cents a name, their money that they need for their business keeps going up significantly, right? But do they need that much money? Why aren't they capped in the amount that everybody has to pay into them? Why is it that through the innovation and the hard work of extensions and registrars that they benefit? Shouldn't they just get enough to survive? Why do they need $150 million?
Well, I mean, there's some they made, I don't remember the exact figure, but when they had these auctions and application fees for new GTLDs in 2012, it
was $180,000 an application, right?
Yeah, so they made like tens or hundreds, a couple $100 million or something from that, and they put that in a kitty that's supposed to give out to charities. Like they had so much money, they literally didn't know what to do with it. They had to set up a committee to figure out where to send the money to. And so that's one factor. The other factor is, and this isn't unique to ICANN, any organization has a tendency to grow and increase their fiefdom, hire more people, etc. And that's what's going on here, increased bureaucracy. The third thing is there's nobody stopping this, right? There's nobody stopping. No government is saying, listen, enough's enough. Don't expand your mandate. Run the databases, and that's it. Don't get involved in this other stuff. But the point that frustrates me the most is that, if a domain name's cost to manage the databases is $1, but the market is willing to pay much more than $1, they're willing to pay $10 for a domain name. Should the price be raised to the $10 because the market's willing to pay that much, and then good things be done with those profits? There's an argument being made for that. The difficulty that I have is that the excess money beyond the cost from $1 to $10 isn't even going to ICANN. I could actually almost stomach it if it was going to ICANN, because then ICANN would at least be able to distribute it for internet infrastructure projects to underserviced regions in sub-Saharan Africa, or for internet connectivity, innovative programs. They could actually dole out the money for some possibly good purposes. But the money isn't even going to that. The money is actually going to a public company that's taking all the cream off the top.
So ICANN in doing this, yeah, I mean, I have so many questions that come to mind when you're talking about this. But in my opinion, you keep asking what the public will pay. Reality is, if .NET is $10, it's almost like concert tickets. If GoDaddy or Network Solutions, if Network Solutions wants to charge their customers 25, there's probably thousands of them paying 25. And when Verisign raises the price, maybe that comes out of Network Solutions margins or GoDaddy's margins. They don't change the price on their customers because they know that that's probably as far as they're willing to pay, or as
Yes.
high as they're willing to pay.
Yeah, like we see a lot of competition at the registrar level, at the retail level. So there's hundreds of registrars.
Yeah.
So if GoDaddy's charging $25 and you see that another company is charging you 20, you can go and you'll get the exact same domain name from the cheaper registrar. And so when GoDaddy sees they've lost a customer to the $20 guy, they may lower their price to 19. And so there's competition in the registrar market.
And that's fair.
That's fair. There isn't competition in the registry market because there is no competition for .com. Virtually all the Fortune 500 companies have .coms. And so that's the most attractive place to be for a company. You want the .com. And if you've made your home on a .com or .net or .org, you can't switch. You're stuck for the most part, except at substantial cost. And because there's only one place to get a .com, and that's from the registry operator. That's Verisign. There's only one place.
So if we want to do something about it, we're going to have a lot of volunteers spend their time and try to take over some of these positions. But that's going to take a lot, I would think. So let's talk about some more entertaining things.
Yeah.
And I guess we'll wrap it up.
Sure.
I have a couple random questions about domain disputes in general, and I think maybe you can share some light on it. So one of the things, I actually haven't seen it lately in probably the last 6 months or a year, but my previous cable company, I would visit a parked page and they would put up their own parking page over one of our clients' ones. And then we wouldn't get the for sale inquiry. Right. So they were hijacking the traffic. And
at the ISP level.
Yes. At my ISP, at my house. Right. And when I called and asked them about it, they said they were blocking malicious advertising and they're putting their own there. Which is nice. So with a UDRP, if someone goes there and sees an ad, like, for example, I don't know, like, let's just say, I have rosettastone.com and I have pictures of stones and I've owned that domain before that company was ever put in business. And then it's all language software on there from the ISP and not from me, and I'm not financially benefiting, and then they file a UDRP, would that be a reasonable defense saying that, in my case, Spectrum has hijacked the traffic, or is that just kind of tough cookies?
No, I think there would be a good argument there. So we see that happen with registrars, and also now I'm hearing from ISPs. So essentially what happens if you don't have a website associated with your domain name, your registrar may create a web page and populate it with its own ads, and the ISP is doing the same thing. And so Rosetta Stone could be you could have registered it because you're an archaeologist, or it could be for a brand of tires. But if they're putting, as you mentioned, learning a language or translation services, etc., on there, that would seem to indicate that the domain name is being used in bad faith, and that you registered it to take advantage of the famous Rosetta Stone company's language-related trademarks. And so a lot of panelists who hear these cases have not been aware or have been unable to distinguish between the kinds of PPC ads that a registrant, a domain name owner, will create him or herself associated with their domain name, and the ones that a registrar will, or an ISP in this case. But we've made a lot of progress recently in showing that, listen, you can't have a rule that the domain owner is always responsible for what appears in association with their domain name, when it's the registrar or the ISP in this case is advertising with no permission or no knowledge of the of the registrar. Now, somewhere in your ISP contract or somewhere in the registrar contract, it probably says, you give us permission to do this,
Of
right?
course.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They're not dummies, but most people won't read, that fine print in that long contract, and they may not even be sophisticated domainers. Think of a grandmother whose niece helps her registered domain name, hasn't used it yet, maybe uses it just for email, and gets hit with a UDRP over something like this. So the case can be made that, listen, intent is what counts. If there's no intent to infringe, and this is a third party's fault, or doing at least, that doesn't, and the registrant makes not even a dime off this, then how can you say that those bad PPC links reflect the domain owner's intent in registering the domain name? They don't.
But I'm sure the registrant has a pretty high mountain to climb to prove that that's true, because that would be a pretty common response if you could fake it, right? Because that's a kind of an out there one.
Yeah, well, listen, most professionals like you or I can tell the difference between a cash parking page that a registrant's put up on purpose to make money and a registrar holding page or an ISP holding page. And so that just needs to be pointed out to the panelists, and more of them are realizing that they have to distinguish between these two scenarios.
Got it. And so I guess that applies to if I bought a domain that had infringing ads on it prior to me purchasing it, and then when I bought it, I changed the ads, but someone's using screenshots and sees
right
the infringing ads. You're going to say, well, it hasn't since the day I bought it, so
yeah,
not my problem. Would that be a defense?
Yeah, absolutely, it would be a defense. If you can't be held responsible for what a predecessor in interest did with the domain name, especially if you've discontinued that infringing use.
And then is it just better just to have it listed for sale with just a for sale page?
Just generally,
I don't park. I just have everything for sale. I don't want to deal with parking. It's safer just to put everything for sale.
So parking does come with risks that no web page or a parked website doesn't come with, right? But there's also some benefits of parking. And so you really need to make the judgment call about whether the money that you're making from this is worth the risk, and whether you're able to exclude negative keywords, or whether you're able to do broad categories that aren't related at all to the subject matter of the domain name. So I think it's on case-by-case basis, Jeff. Like if I owned 5 domain names, I would be able to keep an eye on each one of them and the parking that goes up. But if I own 10,000, that'd be an impossibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the market changes based on clicks, and then it changes on you, and then things go bad. And my last question, it's an important one. What's your favorite table game that we're going to play when we're in Vegas together?
Table game. Well,
I'm a slots guy.
Let's see. We'll play some blackjack or roulette. We'll play some roulette. Yeah.
All right. A little roulette, a little blackjack. I'm looking forward to it. For people listening, ICANN is having a meeting. ICA is having a meeting at Resorts World in Vegas on January 17th to the 20th. And you can get tickets. You're going to be a member, and you can get tickets from the ICA. I suggest you join, because as you can hear here, you get to hear things from someone like Zak. And if you're serious about the domain industry, you get all kinds of updates and reports regarding what's going on in the industry and what they're involved in. And I think it's a great cause, and we get to go hang out with a lot of people, do the same thing that we do, and have shop talk for 3 days, play some table games, lose our shirts, have a few drinks.
Yeah, if you go to internetcommerce.org, you can find out about it, or go to domain name wire, dnw.com today. They actually talked about it. You have to become an ICA member, join it. And it's not just 100 people in the domain industry. It's 100 of the top people in the domain industry. These are all the most successful people, or many of the most successful people who are committed to the industry, as well as some newcomers who are committed to learning more about it. But it's a tremendous group of people, and it's not a heavy conference kind of content. It's very much a social networking opportunity with some policy stuff, because we are the Trade Association for Domain Name Investors. So we're obliged to have some kind of policy content, and we do that.
There we go. So that's all she wrote, I think. And unless there's anything else you'd like to add or any questions you have for me.
No, Jeff, listen, congratulations on your new show. I was, from the moment you mentioned it, I was hoping you'd ask me to come on. I really enjoy spending time with you both on this podcast and in the real world. So thank you very much, and good luck with everything. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.